So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the third of four Practitioner Insights this summer, all part of this 2022 summer internship program with the Shepherd Higher Education Consortium on Poverty. Just a reminder, it is being recorded. The overall format, I'll ask several questions of Tressa Lacy, who just turned the camera on, and you'll be able to jump in with questions at the end. Although go ahead and, if you like, you can go ahead and put the questions in the chat just so you don't forget them and we can return to them. But if you like, we'll have you, turn your video on and ask the question. If you'd rather not, that's fine. You can put it in the chat and indicate that you're not going to turn your video on. My name is Tim Diat. I'm Executive Director of the consortium. Thanks to everybody who's joined us tonight. We're really fortunate to have Tressa Lacy here, Administrative Vice President of Undaunted Women, joining us here tonight. Tressa, thank you. Thanks for coming. She's joining us from the West Coast, so we're disturbing the middle of her Sunday afternoon or late Sunday afternoon. And I wonder if I'm going to sort of let you introduce yourself, if that's okay, and I'll sort of in a couple of different stages. So maybe first by telling us a little bit about your professional journey, that's brought you to your current position.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So just a little bit about me. Let me go ahead and get started on that. So I'm the founder of Undaunted Women. It's a nonprofit that works with refugees resettling in the Seattle area. We'll get lots into that. I also am an accountant by trade, so I do have an accounting business, and I actually am an adjunct accounting instructor as well. I really am passionate about education and mentoring, so you'll get to see all those things, how they play into what I do. Another thing that I get to do is I get to speak to audiences all over about like opening your eyes to blind eye culture and experiencing kind of that meaningful mentoring. And to go back, I think it's really important that I start at my beginning, which some of you may find, I hope none of you are sitting there saying, yeah, that's about how I grew up. If it is, let's talk after this. Please reach out. So my life started like, I don't know if this is ordinary, but I thought it was. So I'm this little girl in this blue dress at the very end. And my life was just picturesque. These are custom made gowns. My life was perfect. Lots and lots of kids in my family. But we grew up, my dad owned a sawmill and the logging industry was very lucrative at the time. So he didn't think he needed to go to school or anything. And, we started this logging company, started a sawmill, everything was going great. But things turned upside down really, really fast. So this is where I was just a couple of years later. I am this girl in the middle, no shoes. And this isn't a family picnic. I want to be really clear here. This is all of us transitioned. My dad's employees left. There were all kinds of IRS issues. An employee had sawed off his arm, so there were some allegations and some litigation stuff going on there. There were just all kinds of problems. Half the loggers were leaving the industry. It was a really, really hard time. And so I think what I can offer today, I'm hoping, is that I can offer an understanding of poverty beyond the simple like haves or have-nots. There's so many factors. And I think specifically, I want to show you what the bootstrap approach is. We don't accept help. And in fact, it's most important that we're seen as not accepting help, that we're seen as self-sufficient. This is more important to us than the safety of our children or anything like that. So if anyone's going, okay, hold on, my life was like that. Again, like I said, let's have a chat. So it's easy to see self-reliance as a great thing, but I'm going to show you kind of that opposite view of people that grow up this way and that don't have enough to eat, but don't go and get the help that they need and how that kind of affects the kids. So I started stacking boards at the age of 5. And then by the time I was 10, I had my own chainsaw and we had transitioned into logging full time. So again, this isn't a family picnic. I'm 12 here, and let me just demonstrate kind of our living situation. We live in a mini school bus, those tiny ones, and the ones with the white top, the whole yellow bottom, all of us. So I have 13 siblings, if I didn't say that at the beginning. I have 13 brothers and sisters, and we live in this mini school bus on the top of a mountain. And we're so disconnected. Like our living situation shows you how disconnected we are from people. For example, there's no running water, no electricity. We have a little creek we kind of use to bathe in, different things like that. And we're in absolute poverty, right? You can see our clothes. They're not, brand new. They're soaked in tree sap. We don't have a way to wash them other than the creek, but then you have an extra pair of clothes to do that. So it's a mess, right? So I honestly thought my life was normal. I thought everyone grew up this way because look at all the people who did, right? So really interesting, right? So obviously you can see some issues with this, maybe, hopefully, hopefully. And one of the issues you're probably thinking is maybe like somebody's going to get hurt, right? And if you're thinking that, you're dead on. And the person that got hurt is me. So a couple years into this, when I was 14, I was injured in a really severe logging accident. So I think really I want to make sure I'm emphasizing this, like my eyes are completely closed. I don't really know what the world's like or what other people's lives are like. This is how I'm living, and I think this is absolutely normal. And we don't want anyone to be upset. We don't want a businessman being upset. His taxes are paying for food for our family. All these things. There's very self-reliant. So if you hadn't caught that. And one of the big themes that's really stuck out to me has been from a book I read called The Lotus Eaters, just kind of a novel. And it says in different contexts, but we close our eyes to spare ourselves and those we love because you don't want to see what the reality of your situation really is, right? So we had to do a lot of that. But at 14, so I was in this logging accident and our eyes couldn't, like my eyes started fluttering open because they couldn't stay closed much longer because this is what happened. So my brother was pushing a tree and I was cutting a tree and he was using this big tractor, we call them skidders in logging, and he's pushing this tree over and it snaps over and knocks me off my feet and shatters my left leg. So I go through, this initial, I get a little bit of medical help and I get my leg cut open and I get a plate put on there, but it wasn't enough because there was so much inflammation that the staples had to come out. And the next thing we know, my leg's 6 inches wide and it's a really bad situation. I developed compartment syndrome, which is where your muscles are like suffocating your nerves and your muscles, right? Those muscle compartments. And not only that, I developed staph infection when I went home from this. So my parents couldn't accept help and they're like, what, she needs more surgeries? What do we even do? So they took me home right after the doctor had said she needs immediate surgery. She has acute compartment syndrome, and if we don't operate, she's going to lose her leg or her life. We don't know what's going to happen. Loaded me in the car, took me home. I can't explain why. I can't explain their kind of thinking other than this. I'm guessing it has something to do with this self-reliance or things like that. Or, I don't know. But fortunately, you can see I'm living and I'm here. So I had my grandmother drove 900 miles, picked me up, got me life flighted to the Children's Hospital, got there in time to have blood transfusions because they couldn't even operate. I wasn't healthy enough to operate. But I got the blood transfusions I needed and I got the help and support that I needed. And you can see how that kind of opened my eyes a little bit, just kind of fluttering like, okay, something like it feels like when my leg opened, my whole life opened in front of me. Like maybe there's a problem with the way that we're living. But it didn't stop anyone else. I was so fortunate though, because I had people that helped me, I would call them mentoring. And that's why everything I do is so mentoring focused. And the way I would describe that is they weren't pushy. They didn't want me to see my situation too fast because I might not be able to handle that. But they were really supportive of me as my eyes started to open. And they were there for me to go through that grief of like, maybe my life wasn't what I thought. And then also to support me in my goals and my dreams when I said, okay, I have some work that I want to do. So the main lesson is just like, for me is like thinking about the people that have made a difference in my life. Maybe you have some of those people that kind of have not, like they've opened your eyes. And then they've supported you as your eyes have opened, as you're like, I'm confused. What does this mean about everything I've ever believed in? Things like that. So that's really like taking you way around, but that's where I came from. And that's kind of how I've gotten to my drive and motivation that helps me do the work that I do now.
Well, I thought I had an interesting child. So tell us a little about Undaunted Women.
Okay, so I think the other part of that quote that says at the very end, it says, it's just from the Lotus Eaters, and it just is this comment towards the end of the book, and it says, to see demands responsibility. So I think for me, as my eyes have been opened, I'm like, oh, I have a responsibility to myself. I have a responsibility to my family, my family, like my children now, and I have a responsibility to society. So what does that responsibility look like? And so with Undaunted Women, that responsibility, like helping my community. So Undaunted Women, it's a nonprofit founded that helps refugees in Seattle. And I think it's important to start kind of maybe with the statistics of why that's kind of important. So let me start with that. And then if I go through that a little bit, I think you'll see more like, okay, this is why this demographic. For me, it's kind of like the idea of, you saw I kind of came from, we had, and then everything was okay, but then all of a sudden we didn't have. And I think that's the story for a lot of refugees, is they had something and then they fled and then they don't have anything. So these are just some of the statistics for the refugee population. So why refugees? So in terms of tackling poverty, there's just a high need for community service organizations. So a lot of refugees, they might have the education before, and then they come and they have to leave quickly. They don't have to take anything, and it's hard to get credit for past accomplishments. It's really complicated. And so again, you can see the need, right? So 1 in every 78 people are displaced. That's like 90 million, right? And then this bottom number just blows my mind. It's estimated that there's going to be 1.2 billion refugees due to climate change by 2050. That's like, are we hoping to be alive by then? That scares me. And then particularly how many children are born in that place. Another question that gets brought up a lot is where they come from. So this is where most of the refugees are. This is where they're originating. You can get into more detail of kind of like why they're coming from these different areas and the conflicts or the climate crises that are happening. But Afghanistan does continue to be one of the top countries of origin for refugees. At about 1 in 10 are Afghan by birth. So for me, in this area that we're in, especially because the US has been hosting a lot of those, that's generally where they come. So we're serving a lot from Afghanistan. Another question that comes up a lot is kind of, where are they going? This is another thing I think that comes up in terms of poverty, right? So 83% are hosted in low and middle income countries, okay? And then the least developed countries provide asylum to 27% of total refugees. That's interesting, right? Anyway, so this is just kind of, I hope you can see the importance of the work that's happening, and in specifically in terms of like helping, like there's a high need here, and I'll kind of show you specifically why. So just in the US, funding for refugee resettlement was really cut under Trump. Resettlement offices lost about a third of their funding and staff. And then though the funding all of a sudden increased under Biden, the resettlement agencies are struggling to meet the need of refugees because they're fighting for qualified and experienced employees like everybody else is. The Taliban takeover that just led to just so much more problems, right? And also Biden has this big goal of resettling 10 times as many refugees. He wants to settle 125,000 like within the year. And that's just such a huge increase from what it was. That's 10 times more than it was under Trump, right? And then in addition to all the refugees coming, so all these resettlement offices, instead of getting like 3 months notice, they'll have like 3 hours notice. So they don't have the manpower, the resources to provide that one-on-one support, that mentoring that I'm kind of talking about. And then also refugees are coming to like, especially even the US, are coming in unprecedented ways and in numbers. So for example, we learned how really suddenly, because we had such a high demand for it, we had to learn how to fill out humanitarian parole paperwork. It's a new action by Biden to expand the definition of qualifying individuals. That provision though ends. These families are expected to provide all of these documented things to say, like, for example, they have to get a hold of the person they worked for in the military, and he might be retired and then did this, that they have 12 months. And some of them that will end in September. So there's just some huge needs, huge concerns. And so the need for community service organizations serving this population is really urgent. And like you said, from that, if we're going to have that many, in the billion, the 1.5 billion refugees in the next 30 years, then it's not really expected to decrease. That's really why that's why refugees, and then kind of how that I think you kind of asked how that ties in with what I'm doing. Is that more like what was kind of the questions that come up?
Yeah. So I was just curious, so you've got the sort of your professional journey there, and then the work of Undaunted Women, and how do you see those sort of coming together?
Okay, so this really, it just came to me, and it doesn't always happen to people, but it became really clear to me. And it came in terms of a can opener. So I kind of wanted to show that a little bit, but okay. So it's COVID. So that automatically complicated refugee resettlement in general. Families were going to the grocery store, like their shelves were empty. They're like, what is going on? So there's some extra help that's needed there. So I thought, I know they need some help. Why don't I just gather some food from everyone that's, got it in their pantries or hiding it in their garages because they're stocking up. We're going to have some chats. We're going to gather all this food and drop it off. So I did that. And I went and I dropped it off to where I knew they resettle most families, come right away to this apartment complex. And I went outside and I pulled out all the food. And what ended up happening was this woman comes out with this really old rusty camping can opener, and she starts opening all the cans. And I just couldn't help but think to myself, like, what's happening right now? Like, should she be doing that? Why is she doing that? So I surveyed, we served with a community partner, we served about 2,000 refugees, and come to find out 78% didn't even have the resources, like didn't even have a can opener. So let alone the empty apartments, let alone the food, let alone everything else, something as basic as a can opener. And I think for me, because of my upbringing and the way that I was raised, and then kind of those eye-opening things, the experiences I've had through mentoring, I think I went, I get it. So really they are, if you think of like a can that's just been dented, like somebody's been trying to get into it. Have you guys ever tried to access something? And I thought, this is like me, like all the hard work and the perseverance in the world is not going to open the can. It's just not going to happen. And if it does open it, I'm going to get a tiny pin and get a little bit of juice out. So it's just that, like, I really feel like that was just kind of that I needed. And once I knew that and saw that, I went, I know what the can opener is. It's not the solution. A lot of people might say, let's just buy all these can openers. We just need a few hundred can openers, everything will be okay. But we don't. Every single person needs their individual can opener. And for me, that means like a mentor, a friend, and that person that's kind of opening their eyes. So that, anyway, that's how that ties in for me, really.
All right. And then, so can you talk a little bit more about the work of Undaunted Women, like how you're doing that, how you're implementing that?
So what we do is we ask them this question. It does have to start sometimes with like this drop off, and then collecting information from people. And then we'll say, hey, what do you hope for? So that's our question. We'll say, what do you hope for? And we've gotten the answer back that's just stunned us is, a lot of them will say, what's hope? What's this word? What do you mean hope? I think it's important to point out, just in Afghanistan alone, a lot of the women that we're working with, 60 to 80% of them are in underage forced marriages, and that 90% of the women they can't read or write, even in their native language. And, when we're talking again, when we go back to this idea of like, we close our eyes to protect people we love. Another thing that we do is like, when you see problems, generally, you see people also blindfold people, right? So like you blindfold your kids when they're breaking with a pinata, you're making things harder, or you blindfold victims. Like when they capture people in battle, they're blindfolding their victims. So I think this idea of like vision and sight is really important. So these women, so 90% of them that live in rural areas, and 75% of Afghans do live in rural areas. So they can't even read or write in their native language. And so they're really like, to even say, what do you hope for? They're like, no idea. What are you even talking about? So we go in with that. And then generally it takes a little love, but we figure it out. We get there. So one woman, I actually have a picture of this one because I want to show you because it's just so beautiful. She came to us and she said, I want to be an artist. I want to do art because I'm so worried about my family back home that I don't even know what to do. So she said, can you connect me with somebody who knows how to do art? Absolutely. Let's find you an artist. So we found an artist that actually came to us at the exact same time. These two people came to us at the exact same time. An artist saying, this is the demographic I want to help. And this woman saying, this is how I'm going to work through my anxieties. And so we were able to match them. So this is what we do. We don't have like these, we do have some programs that are just requested a lot that we do, but more it's just that one-on-one. What do you hope for? What can we do? Another thing that's turned into a program, because there's been a lot of asks for it, has been language mentoring. So this woman you can see right over here on the right, she asked for somebody to they can enroll in formal language classes. So we're not talking about offering like those kind of programs. We're talking about conversational English. So they have that somebody to call to practice so they can gain more confidence in speaking it. And so this is what we're doing. Like, this is how we're going about it to create the relationships that I'm talking about. This is how we're doing it. So we're just being really creative. So this language mentoring, huge, huge, huge win. We do this, you can see on the left, we do it virtually. So people can do it from anywhere in the world. We have somebody serving Undaunted Women that lives in Ghana. So they're just practicing this conversational English. And so it's just really beautiful. And you can see this, we'll call her N, that she said, hey, this is how beautiful this opportunity has been for me. And then I want to share an example. I actually have a video for somebody that's on this side. This is the woman being served. And this is actually an example of the woman that became a mentor that doesn't even live in the same state. So let me share that with you real quick.
When I was first approached to be a volunteer, I was hesitant at first because I questioned what I had to contribute. I'm not an English teacher and I don't speak Persian. And so I felt, what can I do that could possibly make a meaningful difference? But I accepted the opportunity and I'm so glad that I did because it has been such a meaningful experience for me this past year. As I have worked one-on-one with a woman from Afghanistan who has come with her family as political refugees. And I have truly gained a friend out of this experience.
So what's interesting to point out is that it's not just about like the people that we're helping, it's also about the community too, right? So we're helping people in the community find that sense of connection, that if we're talking about like diversity, equity, inclusion, we're talking about a lot of these other things, they come up that way. And then this, I really, really am excited to share to you because this is where we finally get to the eyes open. This takes a while, but let me share this. We'll call her S.
یگانه چیزی که من را در امریکا متعجب کرد حق و حقوق اطفال، حقوق خانم‌ها و کمک‌های زیاد مردم امریکا به مهاجرین افغانستان.
I just love her and I love her story. So she asked for help. She wanted to become a CNA. So that's kind of how that bridge started. But then we get to the eyes open. She said right there, we didn't say anything. We just said, can we ask you a couple questions? What surprised you most? She's like, women and children have rights. Isn't that what we're going for, right? The eyes open thing. So I'm really excited about the different things that work has been able to do. It's really, really, really been able to add. Anyway, that's kind of how we say, what do you want? And then we try to find a way to facilitate that.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Were there any other successes that you wanted to highlight maybe?
Sure. So some of our other programs we do tailor mentoring. A lot of the women have asked to become tailors. That's something they can do at home. And but it's not easy. So again, with this can opener idea, they can't just go out and find work easily. And then again, you're not just talking about sewing, you're talking about running a business in the US. So that's where kind of that accounting background has come in for me. And then that mentoring focus has really been important. So I've identified companies that they can become tailors with. And we've been fortunate to find a really, really awesome tailoring company in, not a company, but they're called Prima Donna Studios, and they sell dresses that go for a lot. They pay the tailors really, really, really well. No matter where they live, they're paying them at least Seattle wages. So the individuals are able to, we're helping them get, not just like get their sewing machine, but we're helping them go through and say, okay, this is how you run a business. And when you say you have to net this much, that means that you have to allow this much for your self-employment taxes and this much for this. So there's a lot of mentoring that goes in there. Again, I just, as a reminder, like all of these are just to build that bridge so they have that person to turn to. So that's kind of, that does it. So we have the tailor mentoring, right? Or even the business owner mentoring. Another ask that we get, I actually have a picture of this one because this one's so cute. I can't get over her face. The woman, we get a lot of asks to drive because the women do not drive. Most of the ones we found, there has been very few. And then just thinking of terms of like the driving thing started happening in Afghanistan, like since we've been alive. So it's not new. So look how happy she is. She had asked for somebody to help her practice driving, not be in school or teach her all this, just the practice like you would with your teenager. And she's just so happy. And she wanted pictures and everything so she could show her kids how brave she was. It's just, that's been a really, really cool program just to be like a driving mentor, just practice driving. A little scary at times, but it's gone well. Another one has just been like educational mentoring. So this woman on the left, she asked for, she came, she was 19 when she got here and she's like, I want to go to school. I want to become a doctor. And this woman on the right, she actually was one of our volunteers. And she's a pre-med student. She was born actually in Kurdistan. And so she lived in a barn with a leaking roof and she was evacuated to the US and became like kind of a medical interpreter. And, that's how she kind of got into pre-med. And so she, again, these kind of came at the same time. And so she's been really patient to help, we'll call her on the left, we'll call her S, to help her be patient and like really believe in her dreams. So that's been as it goes on, because medical, that kind of dream takes a lot. So she has to start really slow. And then just one more program we've started has been geeking out with kids of color. And so we have a partnership with them and they just teach kids how to code. So that's been really rewarding. And then another thing has just been kind of like helping people meet their multiculturalism goals, like with as far as like more successes, we they invite us for dinner, we invite them for dinner, we're sharing food, we're sharing culture. And then like this woman on the right, this is her celebrating her birthday. We're like, we do birthdays and we're making a big deal out of it. So that's been really incredible. Probably the number one success I would have to say is this is my daughter here on the left, and this is her new friend on the right. And she wrote an article for a children's magazine, and she just said, I'm so glad my mom started helping people because we have a lot more friends now. And just, I love how she wrote that. They're so happy to know they're not forgotten. It's just, anyway, that's my biggest success. My kids have, they have more diversity of friends and they're seeing people differently. And just, yeah, it's been really, really amazing. So.
Wow. That's fantastic. Now, although I will say, I wouldn't want the audience to walk away being like, well, this must be easy work. It's all successes. Everything goes perfect. Any particular examples of setbacks or challenges that you all had to work around, overcome?
Definitely. Okay. So we got to be real here. So the first setback, I think, and I wonder how many organizations have this, is we'll call it the Santa Claus approach. So like I said, when I showed up and I'm just dropping stuff off, I didn't realize at the time that I needed to be more aware of individual choice. So after a few drop-offs like that, we got the idea. We said, okay, what really is going to set us apart as an organization is we're not going to show up with an old sofa and say, here, enjoy. We are going to build partnerships with some stores so they can go and shop for free. So it's a lot more work. The approach we're taking is so much harder, but we're not going to just do the drop off. We're not going to do the Santa Claus thing. So they say, I need, bedding, I need this, whatever they need. So we've set up community partnerships with stores where they can get grants. We have grants for so many funds, in vouchers or whatever, and they can go and they can shop. So when you take the women there and then you meet them with somebody and realizing like they've never shopped before. So set them up with somebody that can show them, okay, this is what the pricing means. This is what the US sizing means, because some of that is different. I mean, just think if you're like in a foreign country and you're trying to do all this, right? And they just love it. I remember one time the women were just giggling because they were like, should I buy this handbag and this handbag? Because we told them, you have this much money, spend it on whatever you want. And it just gave them back this like sense of humanity, instead of like, I've had every choice taken from me. And, you know, they're telling me to be grateful for someone's old sofa. And it gave them a space to complain and point out all the bad things about this. And it was really, really, really empowering. We tried to do that with our also like with the sewing women. Like, we don't say, here's your sewing machine. We'll take them to the store. We'll watch her kids while she goes around and tries every machine. And, you know, it can be really interesting sometimes, but we do it that way. So we've learned that. That's one of a huge lesson that we've learned. That's not our only setback. So I'll get into another one. Okay. Our second setback has been like quality volunteers. So we've struggled to find super, super high quality volunteers a couple times. So there's been a couple cases where, one in particular I can think of, we had this woman who was retired, and she was an occupational counselor to help people, you know, get resettled in occupation. And she was just the perfect volunteer. But she had obviously some type of a financial pressure, because she was telling people she was raising money from the organization and then taking it for herself. So bad stuff happening there. And then people want their receipts and you're like, what money did you donate? And then track that down. So we had to design some really good systems to keep track. And we're 100% volunteer run. So nobody gets paid. There's nothing going there. So we really had to say, okay, we depend on volunteers, but how can we screen them better? So we started asking questions where, I'm telling you all, when you're going to volunteer. So we said, okay, we don't reimburse for mileage. Is that going to be an issue? And really what we're gauging for is financial pressure. If you need to be reimbursed for gas, well, maybe not anymore, but now before, if you need to be reimbursed for mileage, then maybe that's not, we need people that don't need to be, aren't facing such financial pressure that they can't pay for the gas to go visit a family. And then motivations, just trying to get more clear on there, looking for manipulative personalities, like just arranging questions that can gauge for that. And then gauging on, like, if somebody asks you, it's like self-reliance, like if somebody asks you for something, what are you going to do? Like, kind of do this align. And then really with boundaries. So questions like, if we message you, how soon will we respond? Believe it or not, we're not the tech industry, and we don't want, if you're going to respond within 10 seconds, then you might have some boundary issues. We'll talk about that. Right. So we had to do better with our screening and with our questions, and it's hard, and only take really high quality volunteers, but they've come. So we've grown. I mean, I think in just like 2 years, we got like 150 volunteers, and it's just growing, and they're coming and coming. So it's really, really incredible.
Well, I've got a whole bunch more questions, but I want to make sure that there's time for any questions from the audience.
I just thought of one other thing that's probably really, really, really important to pull up. So I think I think this is going to come up no matter where people are. And so we did experience some severe secondary trauma issues, especially when the Taliban took Kabul, and we had people trapped there, and we had people that were here that had just made it out, and then they're asking about, we had some really, really scary situations. And so volunteers were experiencing secondary trauma as they're like watching this, person be beheaded, or they're, just some horrible things that they're going through. And so one other thing we had to do, I would say, is vital for every person in the world, but especially when you're running an organization, is we had to start doing trauma stewardship training. We had to bring in doctors and social workers, and we had to say, what do we do here? So there's a really great book on it called Trauma Stewardship, but just recognizing like that we're stewards over trauma. And so first off, working through our trauma, right? And then second off, we're really careful with the volunteers we have. And so we can't even just do one-on-one. We have to do like 5 people to 1 family, because you have to be able to take turns and rotate through. And even like, okay, I'm doing admin only for a month. Different things like that. So that trauma stewardship, I thought that's actually probably our biggest setback, and probably our biggest thing that I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, thanks for coming in with that. That's really important in this work. Anyone want to say? You can just go ahead and use the raise hand feature if you want, or you can even turn your camera on, unmute, and jump right in, I suppose. I'll give the pause as you get your question formulated. Oh, Sabrina, sure.
So Tressa, can you talk a little bit more about how you recruit volunteers, and then the process of how do you connect them with the refugees?
So that's probably the biggest hinge that happens. That's the most important role that we have. What we try to do is we have two different types of advocates, is what we call our, if you're boots on the ground working with people, we'll call you an advocate, right? So we have two different types of advocates. One is an intake advocate. It might be like they're not really social workers, but essentially we're all doing social work. I probably should have majored in that, right? But actually the other skills come in handy too, right? The accounting things come in great. But they come in and they'll say, okay, what are your top 3 needs? What are your top 3 wants? And really those questions are like, what do you hope for? And as soon as we can get to a point where we get a clearer picture, then we look at our volunteer base and their skills, their talents, and their really what they're motivated by and what they bring and where they would be best placed. And then we try to match them. For example, the art mentor with the women saying, I want to learn art. That was really clear. So things like that. Driving mentor, okay, we're going to need somebody. It takes a special kind of person. It takes a really special kind of person to be able to ride in a car. Even like if you're training your teenager to drive, that's scary, but someone else, you're letting them get in your car. And so who can do this? So for that example, that was like a woman who's run a whole nonprofit, who really can come in and realize like, okay, I need to buy the student stickers here. I need to make sure they all have their permits. I need to take them through this paperwork, just so many levels. So, and then otherwise we call the other individuals just friendship advocates if they're not like a specific English mentor, things like that. And so then we'll just match them per family the best we can. They're not always a good match. So we usually give them 2 families. One, generally we'll give them families that are from different tribes and have different backgrounds. So all of the women we serve are not, uneducated, illiterate, things like that. So we have 12 different tribes that we serve, like just talking from Afghanistan. And so what we'll do is we'll generally give them like, okay, we have these 2 new people, 2 new families. One is from, they are more progressive thinking, more forward thinking than one, they're 6 kids and they're, we're married at 14. So they're only 20 and they have 6 kids in there. So we'll give them 2 families. And then, so they have somebody who's has less needs and somebody who has more needs, and then kind of see, and then if they need more assistance on one side or the other, or connect with one family or the other more, we just kind of go from there. It's not a scientific, formula, and I don't have the best thing. I think you just go with your gut. The person making those decisions does a lot of that. There's what does my gut tell me? So.
And I see that most of your refugees come from Muslim countries. So do you train your volunteers, give them, brief training about the culture, the religion, and especially how do you find interpreters? It must be hard.
That's a great question. And actually, again, this organization has just really come together well. So the woman, we have one woman that serves on our board who is from Afghanistan, and she served as an interpreter for about 12 years. And so she has a lot of that she brings to the table. So first thing we have her do before volunteers go on, we did cultural competency training. So she wrote kind of a handbook on the culture so they can understand more of that. And then she did a formal training on cultural competency. Definitely important. And then another really good thing you pointed out is make sure you have that board diversity. So over half of our board are immigrants, refugees. And then, obviously having somebody that's representative of the population we're serving, so important. So thank you for bringing that up.
It's amazing what you're doing. Many years ago, when I was a student in Spain, I used to volunteer for the Spanish Commission for Refugees. So when you were describing what you're doing, that reminded me all the work they still do, and so it's amazing. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you. There can never be enough organizations serving. There's always a need. So
yeah. Any others in the audience who'd like to jump into the conversation? Shannon, yeah.
Hi. So I'm working for a nonprofit right now in Louisville where we primarily serve immigrants and refugees, especially young kids. And I was just wondering, for someone who doesn't have like a lot of experience with trauma and trauma training and stuff like that, and also with students who don't speak English as their first language, do you have any advice on how to connect with people who don't speak English or have gone through traumatic situations?
So that's a really, 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 it's a really hard thing you bring up. I think it's best served from an example. So I think just I had a woman that I met at the very beginning, and she had asked me for diapers. And so they were really hard to find at the time, but I did everything I could. She had 4 kids to deliver diapers, deliver diapers, deliver diapers. And I, like I said, I'm not the Santa Claus, but you know, some things you just kind of have to figure out. So I delivered diapers to this woman for a year, for a solid year, every month. And we would text back and forth. And so sometimes you're not aware a relationship is building, but it is. About a year in, this woman really shocked me by text. She said, I can't handle my husband raping me every night. And I went, what just happened? Because people don't automatically, they're not going to open up on their trauma of day one, right? But as relationships build naturally, that's going to happen. And then also, as you're not, I didn't go into her and say, I can't believe you were married at 16, you're in a forced marriage, your property. Like, I didn't go in with that at all. I just showed up with diapers, right? And I got to know her, I got to know her kids. And just as you do that, they tell the language of love is just a universal language. I think that's something that kind of the person that was the English mentor that she was kind of sharing. It's a universal language. And so as you love them, they're seeing that. And then when they have that need or they're ready to talk about that trauma, it comes up. And so, I mean, fortunately, we were able to connect her with resources. We didn't tell her you should get out of that or anything, but she asked specifically for resources. And again, like, we don't advise on this at all, and bad plan. Just we gave her the resources she asked for. How do I file for divorce? How do we do things? And it took her a year to do that, but finally she did. And I was so grateful for that relationship that I built, because what happened actually is that her husband, when he was served those papers, he took the kids and went to Afghanistan. And he's in Afghanistan with the 4 kids. And she's like, I got to go get my kids. So she flies to Afghanistan, a really dangerous thing to do as a woman, you know, especially right now. And it was right as the Taliban took Kabul. In fact, this family was in the airport during the bombing. And so but I was so happy and grateful that I had built a relationship just through dropping off diapers or just asking them, how can I help you? Or, you know, and not, you know, just being there, because she was saying, I'm stuck here, I need help, how do I get out? She wasn't the only one. Like, this was happening with that English mentor. It was happening with the woman that there were so many people trapped, or their families trapped. And again, with the can opener, we had these tools, like we could find the congressperson, you know, the congresswoman was forms to fill out. We could tell them that these people are there. We could help them, you know, contact the embassies. We can do all these things. There were all kinds of lists going around. I don't know if any of you were involved in that, but it was just a really, really hard time to know what to do and how to help people. But, you know, when they don't have internet and they're running from house to house to stay safe, things like that, it's just that universal language of love. And even, you know, just breaking that down, and they feel that, they understand that. Everybody can interpret that.
Thank you.
And any other questions? No? Well, I want to be you know, respectful of everyone's time. And Tressa, I really appreciate you joining us this evening. It's really been, you know, informative about your work. It's really highlighted some really important issues that we all, you know, can contribute on, frankly. So thank you. To everyone, thank you as well for joining this evening. Just as a reminder, we do have our 4th and final of the Practitioner Insights on Tuesday evening with 3 representatives from the Camden Coalition. For students, there is a professional insight tomorrow evening. So it's a packed week, but I hope you'll take advantage of several of these opportunities. So thank you all for coming. Thanks again to Tressa, and I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.